I'm not much for trigger warnings, but it really felt like this movie needed one. I'm still processing The Woman in the Yard, which was my first film of a double feature today. It was a last-minute decision to make this a double feature. Fortunately, both movies were at my theater. Otherwise, I was going to split it up. So, I have mixed thoughts about this movie, and not necessarily because it's terrible as far as the way the movie was filmed, the way the story flowed. It's about the subject matter and how depressing it was. So I think what I'm going to do is just sort of give an overall, and then because I'm still kind of hashing this story out in my brain, I'm going to have a spoiler section, and I will mark it distinctly in chapters and on the screen. So I had to look the director's name up because I couldn't remember it, and I'm going to butcher it. I am not sure how to pronounce his first name. It's not Jaime, but okay, I'm going to put it up on the screen. Whatever. And I looked up his filmography. He directed some horror films that we've heard of. House of Wax was Orphan and The Shallows. And he collaborated with Liam Neeson on various films. I wanted to look him up because I wanted to have sort of a point of reference for his previous movies, and I felt like this was directed pretty well. I felt like it was paced pretty well. It was psychologically suspenseful because you don't quite understand completely what's going on until a bit into the film. I'll give you the basic premise. There's this woman. She has survived a car accident that took her husband. She is a widow living kind of in seclusion in this, like on this, not really, it's like out in the country. And she's still recovering from her injuries as a result of the accident. She has a leg brace on, so she's a bit, hampered as to what she can physically do. And it becomes clear very early on that she is still grieving the loss of her husband, and it's kind of put her a little bit out of touch with her children and their needs. She has a teenage son and a younger daughter. That little girl was really cute. She reminded me of my niece for some reason. They don't look at all alike, but I think it was because she was running around with this little stuffed animal under her arm, which my niece does sometimes, and just the way she talked and the expressions on her face just reminded me a lot of her. But one day, the power goes out in their house, and they then notice that there is a mysterious woman sitting on a chair, draped in black, dressed in black, draped in like a black veil, just sitting there in their yard. And eventually she gets a little closer. And the woman goes out there, the widow goes out there. I can't remember her character's name, sorry. She goes out there to confront the woman, and the woman says some stuff to her that kind of freaks her out. She goes back in the house, she locks all the doors, she tells her kids everything's going to be fine. Let's just keep an eye on this woman. But then as the day goes on, it becomes clear that there is something much worse than just a strange woman sitting in the yard. There is something nefarious at play. And the film isn't very long. It's only about an hour and a half. So you're not going to spend a ton of time sitting there. I started to feel a bit confused by certain things that happened in kind of like around the time of the final act. I feel like that's been cleared up in my head. I don't really have many cons to this film as far as like issues that stood out. There were some small things like the power's going out. How in the world could the water run so long? Unless they had some sort of setup that I wasn't familiar with, but I know that the water in the pipes can run a little bit when the power's out, but you need electricity to run that, to run the water through. Anyway, also, why the hell did you leave the dog outside with the creepy lady? And how did they figure out in what certain way the dark affected this woman? I know that's vague. I might come back around to that in my spoiler section. So this moment in the final act that was confusing to me, and I was getting a little irritated because it wasn't making a lot of sense, some of the stuff that was happening. And then by the end of the film, okay, that's cleared up. That's not really an issue as far as the story goes. And to me, everything made sense by the time it was done. There were some women that were sitting next to me in the theater, and when it was done and I was getting ready to head to the next theater room, they were talking amongst themselves like, do you understand that? I don't understand that. And then they said, well, what about her? Because they recognized me from sitting next to them. And I didn't really go in depth as to what I had actually understood about the story, but I just indicated to them what had happened at the end. This was what happened. And I've just been thinking about this film ever since. It's on my mind even more than Death of a Unicorn. And I think it's because the subject matter was pretty heavy and is pretty depressing. And I feel that there are some people, as I mentioned in my intro, I'm not a fan of trigger warnings. They kind of annoy me. It feels like we're just coddling people. If you're going to be triggered by certain things that are shown to you in a movie, then maybe you just need to be walking around with plastic bubble wrap. You cannot expect everyone else to cater to issues that you have. But I was thinking about this film and I thought, wow, if any film needs a trigger warning, it's definitely this one, because of not just the subject matter, the subject matter, but also how things conclude. And I'm going to go into that in my spoiler review. I'm not necessarily going to give this movie a bad review because I do feel like it was put together very well, and I did think the acting was good. I think her name is Danielle Deadwyler. First time I paid attention to her as an actor was in Carry On. She was really good in here. The kid who played her son, he was good as well. The little girl, she was okay. She wasn't, you could kind of tell there were parts where she was acting, but I thought she did a really good job of being a character that was observing these very scary events in a way that seemed pretty realistic. She was scared a lot because mommy was losing it. Her brother was fighting with mommy. There's this scary woman in the yard. So I felt like in some of those scenes, she did a really good job. So like I said, I have such mixed feelings about this film, and I don't necessarily want to dissuade you from watching it. Just be prepared for the heaviness of the material, and also be prepared for the fact that a lot of what happens in here, a lot of it is a result of what's going on with the main character of the widow. So that's kind of my wrap up of a non-spoiler discussion about this film. Now I'm going to talk about spoilers, and I will put a big warning on the screen. Spoilers incoming. If you don't want to know how it ends, because I am going to go into that, then just stop the video now. And if you want to come back and kind of just hear me hash out my thoughts, because I'm bouncing them off you guys. I know you're not, I'm talking to the camera, but I'm bouncing them off of you. I wish I had somebody to talk with about this. So this film, it's about depression. Okay. That's, not necessarily something that you need a trigger warning for, but it's about depression that leads to suicidal thoughts and then fundamentally suicide. Because the woman in the yard, she is a physical manifestation of the main character's darkest, innermost thoughts, the darkest corners of her mind. And somehow they've been manifested into this strange woman that her kids can see. And you find out that the way she had told her kids that the accident happened with her husband, the way she said that it went down was not accurate. She lied to them because she felt very guilty. But what led to the emotional upheaval of that night that caused the accident was she and her husband, they had moved away from the city because city life was miserable. And they wanted to get away. And she had been in agreement with that. But then once they get to this place out in the country, she doesn't like that either. So you find out that this woman already has some issues. She's got some mental issues / depression stuff. Like she's just not happy. And her husband's like, look, we can't just keep picking up and moving every time this sort of thing. We just can't do that. And then she was talking about, well, then I'll just go away anyway. So you have now received pertinent background information. Then you find out that she's driving the vehicle and she's having these very dark thoughts. And they're represented by she sees images of this woman in the yard before the main part of the story is taking place. She is seeing images of this woman in the yard. Like this is a flashback. And this woman is her dark demons prompting her to, the way I took it was, try to kill herself in the car. But it didn't kill her, it killed her husband. And so she has a lot of guilt about that. She loves her husband, but she's also got these demons of her own that she's battling and she cannot conquer them. She loves her children, but her inner demons are causing a problem with her children. And so what you find out is that this woman in the yard, as I already mentioned, is the physical manifestation of this woman's suicidal ideations, her suicidal thoughts, her suicidal desires. And so there's all this weird stuff that goes on, and the stuff that I had complained about in, leading into the final act, it didn't make any sense to me in the moment, but then I realized that a lot of that stuff was going on within her head. Okay. And finally, she talks with this woman. They talk face to face. And that's when she learns the truth about what this woman is. And the woman is like, look, I'm here because you wanted me to be here. This is the day. In other words, this is the day that you need to off yourself. And she shows the woman, there's pictures of her children on the wall, and she shows the woman the future that her children will have without her, and that it will be good without her. And I understand that this is the type of thinking that can go on in people who have these issues. So the problem that I have with this particular narrative is that it's not necessarily that it condones it, but I guess I would have liked for the ending to be different. And for a little bit, at the end, you are led to believe that the ending is different. The woman in the yard tells the woman, the widow, well, she says to the woman, can I say goodbye to my kids one last time? Bear in mind, she has complete power to just not do this. It's what she's like. She's just is presented as being totally helpless. And I know that's how people like this feel. That's why they do this most extreme thing. They are so wrapped up in their own problems, they cannot step outside this. This is why there are a lot of people, and I go back and forth in my own mind about that. A lot of people do feel that those who self-delete, it's the epitome of selfishness, because you're not thinking about the consequences of this for other people, those who love you. So she makes her children leave, go run to the neighbor's house, like 2 miles down the road. She makes them leave, and she goes in the barn. She sits down with this weapon, and it's showing that she's having this inner struggle. Like there's a big part of her that is scared and does not want to do this thing. But the woman in the yard takes her hands and forces her hands to do these things. And then the woman in the yard is absorbed back in the woman's body. So you know her demons are fully in control now. You don't hear any noise. At the end, her kids come back to the house, and she comes out of the barn, and she seems fine. And they say, is the weird lady gone? I'm paraphrasing, but she says, well, she is for today. And if she comes back, we know how to deal with her, that sort of thing. Excuse my dog. My son has come in the house. She hates him. Well, it's not my dog. So it's my daughter's dog. She hates him. Lord have mercy. Hold on a moment. I'm going to ask her to come get her. Can you come get Tifa? I am recording a review and she keeps screaming at Arturo. Okay, where was I? So the kids come back, as I said. They have this interaction like already indicated. And I was thinking, okay, that was really dark and scary and depressing, sad, but I'm liking how this is ending up. And hold on a moment. Is Chibi running loose? You can come in, but if you don't mind hearing me talk about Death of a Unicorn and the ending of the woman in the... Good. It was okay. I didn't hate it. Hold on a moment. I'm giving my dog some water. Okay, so before I touch on the very last moment in this film, I'm going to mention something that happened in the final act part that I said, was all in her mind. There's a moment where she ends up back in the bedroom with her husband, like he's alive, and they're having this conversation. And then she notices that things aren't right, that this can't be real. It's not right because everything's backwards. The numbers on the clock are backwards. Words are backwards. So she knows she's not living. She's not in reality. She's in this other place. So at the end, when she goes in the house with her kids, and I was thinking, okay, as I mentioned, how dark it was, but I'm liking this. I'm liking how this is going. She has conquered her demons. They go in the house, and then the camera zooms in on a painting that she had done. And it was I think it was her name, like either the name of the woman in the picture or her name or whatever, when an artist puts their name at the bottom, and the letters were backwards. So we know that she did do the deed, and she's now living in this other place where she's happier because all her problems are gone, because now she's not there for her kids anymore. So there's parts about this film that really trouble me, because it's almost like it's sending a message that it's weird. Not necessarily that it's condoning it, but it is like it's sending a message that, okay, you rid yourself of all these troubles in your life, and you will go on to a better place where you will be happier, not being alive. And that's just not something I can necessarily get behind and feel comfortable with. So that's why I have such mixed feelings about this movie. It's going to be pretty impactful for some people, I expect. I mean, it was impactful for me, and I don't, I don't have these issues that are depicted with this character. But people who have gone through that and people who have lost loved ones as a result of that darkness, I would imagine this would be a pretty rough movie to watch. And it's not like we've never seen these sorts of things shown in films before. It's not like it's subject matter we are not familiar with. But for whatever reason, the way it was presented in here just hit me really hard. And I'm just still thinking about it. So I'm kind of taking you on this journey of talking to myself, because I honestly, it's really hard for me to put into words exactly my takeaway from this, whether good or bad. So yeah, sorry to be a Debbie Downer, but this film, it was dark and it was heavy. Anyway, I think all spoilers are done. And at this point, I don't have much more to say about The Woman in the Yard for this review. If you guys have watched it, I would really like to know your takeaway. I did correspond with someone on Twitter today, in a conversation about it, and he was indicating that for some of the things he had been through, it was kind of, I'm paraphrasing him, but, this twist happened, which the twist was the reveal of what had really transpired, that when that happened, it kind of made him, got him really in his feels because of his own struggles. So, yeah. Okay, I don't have anything else to say. For sure, about The Woman in the Yard, I'm going to wrap this up, and we'll see you guys in the next video. I have another review to film for Death of a Unicorn, which was definitely not as heavy as The Woman in the Yard. Okay, you guys. Bye.